For decades, India's been known for its rich culture, history, and monumental nature. However, the country's also been known for its depressing poverty, inequality, and injustice. But now it appears as though only the pleasant, tourist-attracting side has taken over the entire nation. That's right, crazy as it sounds, India just might be becoming a rich country. Is that really what's going on? And if it is, what does it mean for one of the world's most populated countries? Stick around to find out.
According to S&P Global, India is set to become the world's third largest economy by the end of this decade itself.
Just like most things in life, there are two sides to India as a country. But unlike most dual-sided situations, the two sides of India are so distinct that you'd find it hard to believe that you're in the same country if you experienced both. On one side are the wealthy, educated families with generational wealth rooted in either corrupt political ancestry or oil, and natural or business tycoons. These are the parts of India depicted in movies and TV shows. These are the parts where tourists spend their vacation and make review videos. And these are the parts where India's renowned medical facilities and research are done. On the flip and more populated side, however, are slums. It's pretty much that simple. As terrible as you can imagine slums to look like, that's how these cities are. People struggling to get scraps to eat, children starving and taking up menial jobs to fend for sick parents, domestic and sexual violence and abuse, the whole thing, and worse. These are the realities of citizens who happen to be on that flip side. As a result of how large an extent of the population's been revealed in the past decade or two to fall into that poor side, the entire nation's been regarded as poor, and rightly so. Even the statistics support this fact. At least, it did until recently. Over a decade ago, around 2011 and 2012 to be specific, India's rural poverty rate was somewhere around 25.7%, while the urban poverty rate was about 13.7%. Fast forward to today, and that number has dropped drastically to 4.86% in rural areas and 4.09% in urban areas. Clearly, the numbers are suggesting India might just be stepping out of the poor country category.
Rural poverty in India has seen a major decline. According to SBI research, rural poverty fell below 5% for the first time.
And you know what they say, the numbers don't lie. But what if they do lie? The only way to truly identify if national poverty is a thing of the past in India is to take a look at one of the most glaring issues responsible for the high poverty rate, the income distribution, which honestly is as terrible as it gets. It's no longer news that there's wealth and income inequality in the United States. We mean by 22, the top 1% of households in the United States held 30.9% of the country's wealth, while the bottom 50% held 2.6% of national wealth. International reports also have it that the difference in the U.S. median and mean wealth per adult is over 600%. But what if, as terrible as the U.S. seems in balancing wealth and income, India is 1,000 times worse? If you have any doubts about that, here are some statistics to back it up. For starters, there are about 120 billionaires in India, which is more than any other country except the United States. In 2000, there were only 9 billionaires, but following the increased corruption rate in the government over the past couple decades, that number shot up to 101 by 2017. And as plenty as that seems, India still produces about 70 new millionaires every day. In every other case, having so many wealthy people wouldn't be an issue. But here's the thing. Also, in 2017, 73% of the wealth generated in India went to the wealthiest 1 percentile of the nation, while the over 670 million Indians that made up the poorest half of the population saw only a 1% increase in their wealth. Even worse, the top 1% of the Indian population in 2023 was revealed to control 22.6% of the national income and 40.1% of the nation's wealth. To sum it all up, experts and statisticians have calculated that it would take about 941 years for a minimum wage worker in rural India to make as much money as the top paid executive at a leading Indian garment company earns in a year. That should give you a better idea of how terrible the income-wealth inequality is because the government's books don't tell the story. The Indian government has always been so corrupt that there were too many inconsistencies in the official income tax data from 1997 to 2000, while no data was published between 2000 and 2012. As a result, it's always been challenging to prove the inequality in income distribution, judging on the reports provided by the government. However, in recent years, the government has moved towards putting stricter tax laws on the ultra-rich. Some of these laws include abolishing the wealth tax and replacing it with a 2% surcharge on the super-rich and adding a luxury tax that ranges between 5 and 28% on luxury goods and services. There are other proposed wealth taxes yet to be approved, such as a proposed 2% tax on net wealth above Rs 10 crore and a proposed 33% inheritance tax on estates exceeding Rs 10 crore in valuation. These laws have played major roles in reducing inequality while creating fiscal space for increased social sector investments, and although it doesn't solve the issue immediately, it's definitely a step in the right direction and is one of the reasons why India is beginning to look like a rich country. Apart from the income inequality being balanced out a bit in more recent years, we also have to acknowledge that India is one of the fastest growing economies of the world thanks to the wealth of natural resources like coal, iron, and magnesium ore, diamonds, and a whole lot more. Most of these resources have been discovered and available for excavation for as long as the country's existed, but several socioeconomic issues have prevented the proper exploration of these materials. In the past decade or less, the Indian economic growth has been spurred by public investment in infrastructure as well as rising household investments in real estate. The raw material processing and manufacturing industries have experienced rapid growth, covering up for the recent decrease in agricultural revenue. Having been able to reduce certain gender and classist discrimination, the government has worked towards providing a suitable environment for the growth of the manufacturing sector. Logistics and transportation infrastructure have been massively developed, mainly in urban India, but also in rural areas. Tax efficiency and rates have been rationalized, as mentioned earlier, and the general business environment is much healthier than it was a decade ago. There's also been progressive growth in urban employment rates, particularly for women. For decades, India, like most Asian countries, had cultural and religious beliefs that prevented women from participating in a lot of economically beneficial activities. Considering the population of women has always outnumbered the men, these beliefs were counterproductive to the economy, yet they were never addressed. However, there have been improvements since the pandemic in 2020, with the urban unemployment for females falling from 14.3% in 2021 to 9%, which is so much more improvement than the sector's had in many years. The urban youth unemployment rate has unfortunately been stifled as a result, but growth on a broader scale is still a positive. And the best part? There's still a lot of room for growth and expansion for various sectors of the Indian economy. Right now, the Indian government will look to harness its global trade potential, which could be the gateway to completely escaping being classified as a poor country. The country already capitalizes on IT, pharmaceuticals, and manufacturing homemade products. However, being able to diversify to export more labor-intensive sectors such as textiles, footwear, and electrical products will skyrocket the nation's GDP in such a short time. Right now, the issues facing exploring global trade in India include rising production costs and declining labor productivity. The government has implemented specific initiatives to solve these issues, but policies like the National Logistics Policy take much longer to implement. This means India will require more time to strengthen its claims of being a rich country. But right now, to answer the question of India being on the way to being a rich country, the answer is yes. A little tweak in the governmental structure and personnel could see things change for the worst overnight. But if that doesn't happen, then don't be surprised if a decade from now, India is up there with the world powers in economic growth. And if that happens, remember, you heard it here first. That's all for this video on India becoming a rich country. What's your take on the current, past, and future of India's economic space? Let us know in the comments section, and enjoy our other videos.